Hey, Brown Girl Banter.
Hey, Brown Girl Banter.
I'm Dr. Lucretia.
And I am Dr. Patience.
And hey, we want to welcome you back. And you can see we have a guest today.
Yay, we love guests. It always adds to the show. Don't you feel like that?
It does.
Yeah.
It's always good to have someone to come in and join in our banter.
Exactly.
So,
I love it. So, as you see, we have my good friend, Alisha here. Let me tell you all a little bit about Alisha. So, Alisha James and I met because our daughters are in the same kindergarten class.
Yeah.
And so I don't remember specifically where, but the most important thing we realized was that we're both from Detroit, Michigan.
Detroit.
And that's all we needed. Like, that just changed the whole
It really did.
That
It was like a defining moment. It was just like before it was like, hey girl, and they were like, hey girl.
Exactly. It's like, I don't hear anything else now. You are from Detroit.
Yeah.
And so since then we have been thick as thieves. People probably think we've known each other for years, but we have not. We have not at all. But she is like family to me now. And so, but the funniest part about Alisha is that, like, she'd be like, well, I'm traveling, or all I gotta do is go speak at this thing, and oh, okay, I'm about to go, blah, blah. I'm like, what you do? Before I can let my kid come over for a play day, I gotta know, like, what do you do for a living? How do you do it for a living?
Right.
So look, I'm about to share this story, which I haven't even told her. So one day she's talking, and you'll hear more about this. So Alisha used to be an officer. So she says something about a gun. I look like, yeah, no, really. Before my kid can come to your house, now I didn't know that she used to be a police officer. I'm like, what you do? I need some clarity, but my baby can come see
So situation, prisons, guns. What do you?
What do you do for a living? And
So are you a spy?
I know, I'm like, you doing a lot of traveling.
So,
active. Now you're from the D, but come on now.
Right.
So as I had got to know her, she explained her job to me, or her career path, which is amazing, and we're gonna let her share that. And we thought, as we were celebrating Women's History Month, and as we're talking about women, and we're talking about entrepreneurship, I'm like, I have a perfect person to be a guest on our show. And so she so agreed. I actually called her in town and available, which is
I know. This is a rare week. It's a great thing.
That was God. It had to be. So we're so excited to have her here. So Alisha, tell the people of the Brown Girl Banter a little bit about why I had to figure out what you did for a living to my child would say.
This is multidimensional, but I think in this day and age, women have to be multidimensional, right? Especially African American professional women nowadays. And so I did start my career as a police officer here in Nashville, and served for 7 years. And then I went on to be a federal probation officer, and served there, was a firearms instructor, and did some defensive tactics training or whatnot. So it really kept me in line with a law enforcement component. And then most recently I served as assistant commissioner for the Tennessee Department of Correction Community Supervision Division. So essentially anybody who was up under a sentence of probation or parole in the state, my division has supervision responsibilities for them. So that was that was enough in and of itself. And then I decided,
Felt a little better.
in the midst of all of that,
I was like, oh,
in the midst of all of that, to start my own business. And so I started my first business in 2016. A clothing company called Tim for Clothing, and it's for women who carry concealed weapons. So detectives, agents, FBI, DEA, that type of thing. TimForClothing.com.
there you go.
But my primary focus is criminal justice reform. So the last 5 years, I have been keenly focused on the fact that our incarceration system, our criminal justice system, we incarcerate too many people for nonviolent offenses. And so my thought process surrounding how do we put a pin in this balloon to bust it open and start kind of like rebuilding is creating and leveraging technology to help people who are reintegrating or re-assimilating into society so they can have the support that they need to be successful. So big task, but up under Governor Haslam, we started that initiative with the department. And now I own my own platform and my own consulting firm, and essentially we go out and help other entities, private industry and government, kind of think through the solutions. So it is a lot.
Y'all, listen to that. I mean, that's amazing.
It's challenging, is what it is.
I believe
It's
that.
challenging.
I believe that. And speaking of challenging, which is a big thing we talked about in our last episode, was kind of like, what was the push to because we know going into your own business and saying like, I'm going to, do this for myself, that is a risk. And it is, we know that it's going to be barriers there, but we do it anyway, right?
Yeah.
So what was the push that made you say, I'm going to do this?
I'm going to jump on out there and make the leap.
Yeah, so it was funny because I was talking to one of my good friends maybe last week, and we were talking about the moment where I knew.
Okay.
And I described it like being pregnant, right? Like you have the idea, this concept of I want a family, but people don't really describe what pregnancy can be like, right? Like we might hear swollen feet, swollen ankles. There's a whole lot of others. Right, exactly. During pregnancy, and I think the development for God to nurture me, develop me, to get me here to this point was not something that was easy. I mean, essentially, I was in a pretty decent position, reported to the commissioner, reported to the governor, so pretty high up and influential, and had a solid salary. I knew on the 15th and the 30th that check was going to come. I was challenged. I had, the staff, I had 1,200 staff up under me. So to navigate that in a government setting, in a very conservative environment, but leading criminal justice reform, which is typically seen a little bit more as a liberal movement, but now we see really nonpartisan, bipartisan efforts for this initiative because it's fiscally conservative and socially responsible. Another plug, right? But it's so important that we have this conversation beyond like Kim Kardashian and Jay-Z and Meek Mill, right? Like, so now it's in pop culture and people are like, what are they talking about? Like, what is criminal justice reform? So just understanding that this platform, I needed to own my own time. I needed to be able to come on shows like this without my media director, in the room. Exactly.
What you can and cannot say.
Here are the stats, and here are the and I absolutely love that position. I loved who I work with, so it wasn't anything like on bad terms, which is great because I still have a relationship with those folks. But I felt like I needed to own my own space, and as freeing as that seems. And as people will always say, "Oh, entrepreneurship is great. Every day is wonderful." They lying. They
just want you to think.
Right. It is hard. It's hard work, and especially when you choose spaces where people are not. It's not something that makes everybody feels good, right? Like everybody doesn't agree that we have an incarceration problem.
Right.
A lot of people think that spending $70 billion a year on incarceration in this country is normal.
Wow.
Because it's a money maker.
True.
And so, I want to disrupt the system, and I want to reshape probation and parole in this nation. And that is a huge vision. So it's not like I stepped out in entrepreneurship and now I own a Dairy Queen.
Right.
Right.
So I think
that's not franchise. What you do is not franchise.
Exactly. So it's like, it's culture shift. It's almost like social entrepreneurship is what I call it. And so, from that perspective, it's challenging. The clothing line is going well, but as I look to the future, I see myself more in this space of criminal justice reform and really allowing the powers that be and other clothing companies to maybe acquire the clothing company, and that still be a need for that population.
Because
but
it is,
it's still an issue. But the fact that we have, in this state, 1 out of every 3 folks may be involved in the criminal justice system
some kind of way.
in some type of way, or be just as involved at some point. Touch that, like, and I forget where that stat was from. And you can go to BJA, NIC, all these other publications that will give you different stats about Tennessee and about the United States. To me, it was alarming. It was like, how do I sit here and not do something, right? So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing we talk about too, is kind of like this platform of like, we were talking about like working with the criminal justice system. Me and you've talked about that a lot, because I do some work for the recovery courts, and like, it's not, we have these ideas about who's being touched by the criminal justice system, and it's not just who stereotypes want you to believe
Right.
it is.
Right.
It is. When I'm in there doing therapy, it's a little bit of it's me, it's
everybody.
you,
Yeah.
it's everybody.
Yeah.
It's not.
It has touched somebody's life some kind of way.
Exactly.
That you're connected to.
Exactly. And so it's very important that we have advocates out
Yeah.
there. And I'm so glad that you chose to make that your
Well, that's you, and I'm here for you.
I'll support you any way I can.
Right. But you know, it really is thinking about it in a different way. So you can't flip a light switch, right? Like we have what 4.4 million people on probation or parole, and 2.2 million people incarcerated in this country, right? Like that it's not going to be a light switch. It's a process. And I think just like we leverage technology to do everything else, I'm keenly focused on how we can leverage technology to create better pathways for people, to use artificial intelligence to give us insight, to meet with professionals like yourself, to give us insight about, you know, what people may be dealing with on a behavioral health perspective, to care about that more, to decriminalize the usage of drugs in our society. Not saying that we don't hold people accountable.
Right.
We gotta hold people accountable, right? But giving them more support and more resources to deal and navigate with whatever addictions or behavioral health issues or even medical issues that they have, right? So I think it's just a different way of solving the problem, but we have to solve the problem.
I love
Yeah,
that. That's amazing. So I think another thing, and then I don't know if you have a question, I'm sorry, but I think one of the things we talked about was balancing all of that. I mean, because that's an undertaking. Now we were like, ours is yes.
Y'all do some heavy stuff. I couldn't do what y'all
But when
do.
she started talking, I was like, oh.
That's a movement,
Yeah.
right? Like, that
Yeah.
is a big deal. And I'm like, and that's amazing. And one, you're an African American woman, you know, who is willing to go out there. First of all, you're kind of like in a small group anyway, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming these are all assumptions. I am not assuming. But then to take on that
that call.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that has to be a lot for you. And I mean, I'm always intrigued because I tell Lucretia, she has to listen to me like, and then I gotta run to girls' school, and then I gotta go do this, and then I gotta make sure of this, and then I'm always out of town this week, and then I gotta, you know, like, how in the world do you say, this is where I'm gonna own my own, and I'm gonna own it in something so heavy, and then I'm gonna have these kids, and I got this husband, you know, like, I'm always intrigued about
this
how people-
fine husband. Thank you, Lord. I'm sorry, just had to put it in there.
Like, how are you balancing all of that? She knows how many times do I say, I'm trying to get my life organized. I think every time I see
She's like, I'm trying to get my life together.
yes, I'm trying to get organized. I feel like I'm always ripping and running all the freaking time. And I'll tell you, I have made this new decision, like, and Lucretia does like, what can I do this quarter? If I stop going for the year, I feel like this quarter, if I just look at the quarter, maybe then I'll feel less pulled in so many directions. What
Like
you
I
say?
told her, you don't have to do everything in one quarter.
Exactly.
Stretch it out.
Yeah.
Stretch it out. So I've been trying to work on that to not feel like, so I feel like everyone who I care about definitely is getting the best version of me all the time, right? And not that they always will, but for the most part.
I love that.
So how are you balancing all of that?
You know, I take it back to the pregnancy analogy, right? Like, so, you know, God gave me this vision, and so now the baby is born. And I felt like, to go back to that a little bit, I felt like if I did not transition from my 9 to 5, then God would in some way like tamper or almost like kind of like put a blanket over the vision, and I was scared of that. I was scared of staying there. I wanted to birth my baby. So I had to birth the baby. But when you have a baby and you're a first-time mom, it feels chaotic, and it feels like, you know, I'm trying to, I know I have to keep this baby alive, and I know I have everything God gives a mother, everything to keep the baby alive. But there's that moment of chaos, right? And so I'm not gonna lie and say, oh, I have everything perfectly poised and put together. That is a lie, right? That is truly a lie. But I feel like I almost compartmentalized. And here's where I think my police training has come into, you know, it's super handy for me. Because when I was a cop, we learned to compartmentalize, there you go, so that when you go on a scene and there's a chaotic situation, or a person who has a loss of life or something like that, then you have to be able to navigate control, maintain control. But when you go into the next call, you can't take the trauma from the last call onto the next call. And so at the end of the night, at the end of my shift, I remember coming home, taking off my vest, right? Taking off my belt. At the time, I didn't have kids at that time, so I was putting my gun belt on the floor and taking off my belt and everything. And you know how you unrelease everything. We women here, so you unrelease everything. And you're like, woosah. And I almost feel like I have those moments in entrepreneurship, right? Where it is like I may have a heavy day or I have a heavy week. And some weeks I feel like I am on fire. I am changing the world. And some weeks I'm like, what am I doing this for? Nobody understands me. Nobody cares about the greater good of mankind. Like,
why am I
doing this, right? But I think it is those woosah moments when I can come back and kind of almost just like reset and then have conversations like, personally, I'm a silly person. I like to cut up. I like to do the Cupid shuffle in people's living room. Like that is my, I love those safe spaces where I don't have to be anything but just I don't have to worry about the stats and the 6.4 million people who are under a sentence of criminal justice. I don't, those things, they creep in, but I try to separate and decompartmentalize, or just kind of self-reflect in those moments, because everything else is like like almost a little bit robotic in a way. So not to say I don't put passion. I put passion into it. You can tell I'm passionate about it. But it becomes you can't attach too much, or I feel like I'll lose myself in that. And policing taught me that. So
that's super cool.
Yeah.
I just like to do that.
Or weird, or I don't know.
No, that's really good.
I don't know. Don't tell me, because I don't know.
That baby analogy,
putting it all together.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do this? Because as we know, like a lot of times with having a baby, they don't give you a manual.
Right. I checked my uterus several times. There's no manual.
It was not delivered.
It was not delivered.
And
maybe I need to go back.
That's the same thing with being an entrepreneur. There are books out there about how to start a business, but there's not a manual out there on how to be an entrepreneur, how to be the business. So how do you manage all that?
Or generating revenue, right? Like keeping the lights on while you have passionate initiative, and it's all great, and you want your product to do well, but then what do you do in the meantime, and how do you leverage your subject matter expertise in order to generate revenue? And it's okay, it is okay to utilize your subject matter expertise in order to bring in income. I think sometimes women feel like, well, I really shouldn't.
I just know this. I don't know.
I do it for free.
Do you know what you know?
Exactly. Know your worth, right? I think that's huge. And I think that's so important for us, because to use your expertise to generate revenue. Sometimes as counselors, we all empathetic, and we like, okay, I'll charge, and we're really like, no, right? Like, we should get on us for that too. That's part of her strategist role, right?
Like, what's your worth?
What's your worth? Know your worth. I know you want everybody to be mental health, healthy, but we have to make sure that we keep our lights on and that we're compensated for what we do. That's why you go to school, and that's a big thing we always talk about too. Like, as healthcare professionals, like, man, they didn't give us a business course, right? It would be great. You want us to go and be in private practice, but they never gave us a business course on how
to do it.
How to do it. They taught us all about human growth and development and how the brain works and all these emotions and feelings. Now go out there. We're like, great.
And solve the world.
And how do you do it? They didn't give us that skill. Because I think they want us to go back to school to get an MBA.
That is
MBA. Yeah.
That is part of the plan, and I'm not going back to school. Krisha talked about this, and I'll let her kind of expound on one of the things I thought was super huge with regards to your work.
And this is like probably a twofold question, because you started out as a police officer, which is a male-dominated field, and I'm always curious about what makes a person choose their profession. So I want to hear about that, but the other piece is, how do you continue to show up? Usually, probably, I could guess.
We're guessing
that either you're the only person of color at the table, most definitely probably the only female a woman of color
Yeah.
that comes to the table that has to stand up in this.
And I'm gonna add another
space.
component, and a person under 40.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So how do
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
how do you navigate all of that? But first, let's start
Yeah.
talking about what made you choose to be.
Yeah.
police officer.
So I remember going to a homicide detective unit in Detroit, the 7th precinct,
Okay.
over by Redford High School.
Yes,
right?
I used to live, but
Okay.
yeah, that's home base over there.
Okay.
Yeah,
She real.
Which is
What?
familiar.
And so I went there and we learned about this case where a mother and a son had been killed by the estranged boyfriend, and everybody else was just kind of like in shock and awe about the crime. And I thought, and they were talking about how the family didn't really have closure because they don't know like the timeline and what happened. And I'm like, who's going to investigate that? Like, who's going to find out what happened to
Okay.
this family? And so that really, I shifted from wanting to be a special ed teacher to wanting to be a homicide detective. So I actually
Wow.
got into policing because I wanted to be a homicide detective.
Okay.
And decided to stay
Wow.
I came to TSU and decided to stay in Nashville because the cops get paid more and they had more time off and less violent city. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, yeah,
That's
I was
smart. No, that all makes
exactly.
sense.
So
But you know what? If you look at the news, you would never think
yeah,
that.
and we're talking
You need to
about
go to the news in Detroit.
and then we're talking about early 2000s here.
Yeah.
So
Which is very different.
But I think about them getting more time off.
Yeah.
They work all the time.
Right, exactly. And so I felt like, okay, I'm gonna stay here and do it. What I did not anticipate and what I did not understand is that being raised in an African American city, you would go into the Coney Island, everybody is African American. The
Yeah.
mayor's African American. So we were raised in an environment where you saw African Americans serve at multiple levels.
Very true.
And so it was okay for us to be doctors and lawyers and everything
Wow.
because that's what we were around. So coming here to Nashville,
Down south.
it was different.
Game changer.
Yeah, game changer, right? And it's not to say, I mean, that's just a geographical location and a makeup of cities. It's not, right, wrong, or indifferent. But I just think that, for me, it was eye-opening at the point when I decided to become a cop. Because when I walked in that room to take the test over here at the North Precinct, and it was about 400 folks, and I didn't see not one other black female. And I saw maybe about 10 other women, maybe out of 400, and a few other black guys. I was like, oh, okay.
This is different.
This is different, right?
This is different. Yeah.
But what I did not, what I decided in that very moment, and still my motto today, is I do not apologize for my dopeness.
All right.
I'm dope, and I deserve to be in that
That's a
space.
t-shirt.
Hashtag, right? I don't apologize for my dopeness. So I felt like, just like they deserve to be in that room, I deserve to be in that room.
Okay.
And I felt like, almost like I represented more than my individual self. And I learned at a very early age that sometimes we have the weight of our community on our backs. And while that may or may not be right, it is what it is.
Yes, we talked about that.
You know?
You had a show on that.
And
Yeah.
so I just had to embrace that. And so during my time as a police officer, there were several instances where I found myself just appreciating the space that I was in, just appreciating the sheer fact that as an African American in the South, as a woman, that I could be in that space. And at the time, out of about, less than 2,000 sworn officers, there were about 20 black females. So it was a very low percentage. We were all very close, but it wasn't, I didn't feel, there were a few times where I felt like the guys weren't accepting, because it's almost like if you went through what they went through, if you went through 6 months,
They respect.
they respected you because they understood that you got there. The only time it got a little weird is when I was accepted to Obama internship, and I was a full-time police officer, and I had just finished my master's degree. My mom sent me the invitation for this internship, and I'm like, I'm grown. I'm not doing an internship, right? And I applied for it. They said if you finish a master's degree or a professional degree, and I'm so happy I did because I was selected. No political background, nothing.
Okay.
And I had to go to the police chief and the mayor to get approval to go.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I had to go, and so I did that, and they approved it. And not only did they allow me, y'all, they paid me as a full-time police officer to go and serve. Yeah, as long as I would go and bring back the skills and help the department, because I was in background recruiting then. And that was a game changer for me, because I saw myself at a different level. Like
Okay.
everybody was dope there.
Mm.
Everybody was sharp. Everybody was bright. It wasn't like your normal internship 18 and 19-year-olds.
Yeah.
There were some, but there were a lot of people who were like 20s and 30s. I mean,
Because they
it was
completed
exactly,
higher education.
exactly.
Okay.
So it was all good, but it was like iron sharpens iron, and then just being around that level of just excellence, right? Black excellence with Mr. and Mrs. Obama in the White House. Like I was walking in the Eisenhower Executive Building and in
That's
the
so
East
cool.
Wing and giving
Yeah.
tours in the East Wing. It was like a little girl from Detroit, from the west side of Detroit.
Yeah.
Is in the White House with the first black president?
Yeah.
Like it just, that is when it really like something lit in me and I was like, oh yeah. Game changer. So it, at every level. But when I was an assistant commissioner, I was the only, or they tell me, I don't know, but they were saying that African American female, like the youngest African American female to serve in that capacity. I will tell you that when I looked to my left and my right, I did not see many African American females that served at the commissioner or the deputy or assistant commissioner level. So again, it was a space where I knew that I was carrying the weight of many people, but it was almost like an honor, a badge of honor. Like, yep, I'm here, I'm a contributor, and it to me, it didn't matter your skin color, your race, your gender, but it was the idea that I want to make sure that I represent my community, and I want to represent who I am, my family. To my family, I want to represent well, and I want to leave this agency much better than what I found it.
Wow.
And I feel like I did that. Yes, I feel like I did that.
Sounds like it.
And then you gave me you had a second part to your question, and I can't remember what was it.
It was about actually
Being the
what
only
you answered is like being the only person in the room.
Oh yeah, being the only person in the room. And one other key point is I never shrink myself to make other people feel comfortable with my success. I've earned where I am, right? And for some people, they may say, well, you have to work 30 years in one particular element to be an expert. Why? Because that's what people told
Not
us.
to that. Not to that.
Yeah, that we had to do. Now, I don't think that overnight you can Google it and become an expert, right?
no.
I don't believe in that.
But the 30 years.
Yeah,
to
the
serve
30 year,
is-
exactly. It's an antiquated model, and so some of that makes people feel really uncomfortable. And I don't apologize for the God-given talents that God has placed in me. I embrace them. I'm very, I'm very collaborative. I'm always like patient, like how can we do this? And what can we do this? Can I do this better? Because I want to grow and I want to learn, right? And I really do. I'm a person who I feel like I want to leave this earth better than where I found it in my own little way.
Okay.
Right?
I love
So,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think like one last thing, I think this was us, right? We were like, our road to entrepreneurship was like a faith, which is why I'm not faith over fear.
Yeah.
It was kind of like
I hope it's
this.
my size.
It was like this thing where you just had to say,
We'll do it.
thy will. Like I'm going to
Yes.
step out here and make it happen. And I think we had to really utilize each other to get, comfortable with what direction you want to take. The thing about our profession is you could go anywhere. Like it's so many avenues, which they still, again, did not teach us that.
That there was other
But
avenues.
another
Yes.
story for another day. But like so many things that we could do and avenues to take. But we had to really utilize our peers and each other to fine tune and to figure it out and to understand and get mentors and things like that to help us. So who would you say was really influential in helping you become the person you are professionally?
Oh man,
We've been on people for that for the month.
Right. Where does it start? So I'm gonna talk about that faith over fear because my faith plays a huge part into where I am and why I feel the need to serve God's people, right? But I would say one of my primary drivers, my dad, my brother, my mother. It sounds really corny, but my core, my core. I feel blessed to have great people around me, and I'm very cautious of who I share my energy with and who I receive energy from, because I feel like all of that plays a part in my inner circle, right? Like if these people are feeding me constantly, right, like feeding me with their different energies and ideas, that it's important for me to kind of like monitor that a little bit and watch it. But I would say that my friends pour into me. My some of my colleagues have been mentors for me. Some of I remember I had a colleague His name is Kenny, and he was like, you should go back and get your master's degree. And I'm like, no. I mean, he didn't look like me at all, white guy from Michigan though, but white guy from Michigan, middle age, and he was like, you should go back and get your master's degree. And I'm like, no, I made it through. I barely made it through the first time, by praying and fasting and everything to get that degree. Right? Yeah, I was the first one in my college first one in my family to graduate from college. So that was an accomplishment in and of itself. But then he really pushed me. And so sometimes my mentors look just like me. Shout out to Vidette Putman, that's one of my other mentors. But, sometimes they look just like me and sometimes they did not. And it was completely okay. And I also realized that some people can only give you mentorship from their perspective, right? Like from whatever, however they see it. So if they're exactly. So if they're a 9-to-5er and they believe in a 9-to-5, it's like I can't talk to them about entrepreneurship, and I'm not exactly. But I'm not mad at it.
No, because that's their
niche. That's yours,
and that's their capacity and their moment.
Yep, that's where they see it, and that's the perspective they're giving me advice from. So that's one thing. But let me tell you who else. And he doesn't I've never met this man in life, but TD Jakes.
Oh yeah.
Like he is my bishop in my head, right? And I love my bishop here, Joseph Warren Walker. Shout out to Mount Zion.
That's us.
So in conjunction between Joseph Walker and Bishop TD Jakes, I mean, between those two bishops, I was I was streaming.
Listen, I got to get through this.
Exactly.
And I remember listening to a TD Jakes sermon one Sunday. It touched me so critically. It was like, you can forget that title, you can forget that corner office. Like, this is all borrowed time. What are you gonna do with the time that God has given you? And I'm like,
Okay, I'm jumping, I'm leaping, I'm doing whatever I need to do.
Exactly. And it was still a struggle. Yeah. After that confirmation, it was still a struggle. I gave a 6-month notice. I did.
I'm glad I'm not the only person that because I think when I left, I gave them 60 days. Yeah. I was like, I can change my mind.
Right.
If you ask me, I might.
Yeah. Oh, they did. Well, it was funny because I told them.
If you be like, we can't find anybody.
Yeah.
I'll be like, well, I can stay another 30 days for you.
Yeah, like an excuse. But there was freedom probably in that 60 days, right? Like, did you feel different?
Yeah. When I turned in the notice, it was like, okay, this is release.
Yeah.
I'm not bound to this anymore.
Exactly.
I have an end. It's like, what's your end date?
What's your exit strategy?
What's your end date?
And it was a lot of preparation and planning because you had to make sure fiscally it made sense and it was the right time, and I got little babies to feed and my fine husband to support and he supports me, and so we have our 18 years of what we have been building, and I didn't want to jump blindly, but I also had to trust that God was leading me in the right direction, and through just really listening to the Word of God and praying, being in prayer, and what we do, Black folks, we fast.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. And so doing that, I think it really helped me to have the courage to tell them. And mine literally was 6 months. I went in on January. We got a new governor, and I love Governor Lee. He's great, but I thought it was a great time to transition.
Okay.
And so I went in and told my boss, and he said, well, just think about it. And so we decided a 6-month transition period. And during that time, it was kind of like, I thought about staying. I think, it was kind of like
all that back
and forth. But then, at some point, you got to rip the Band-Aid off. And so very happy. I don't know where 20 years where we'll be or where I will be. And I hope that we are having this conversation with you on a beach somewhere, right? That would work, right? But I'm less afraid, as uncomfortable as I feel in this season. I feel the most confident in what I'm doing.
Yeah, right.
I love that.
Yeah, that's
Girl.
right.
Y'all, BGB up in here. Do y'all hear this woman? That's amazing. I'm so glad you came today.
Thank you for having me.
I mean, I might be still in that pregnancy analogy.
No, it's totally okay. It's totally okay.
It's mine now.
You can have that.
It's mine.
I'm good. It's public now. I'm good. Yeah.
It's mine.
No, I'm licensing it. Cut me my check, my businesswoman.
Oh, we appreciate you though. That was
Yes.
amazing. Thanks for coming and sharing
Thank
with
you.
us, Alisha.
Thank
You
you so
are
much.
great. And big shout out to Mike. Thanks for letting us grow with your wife, who shouted you out multiple times. So this was great. So as always, we want to make sure if you have questions, comments, anything, please drop them in the comment section for us. Be sure to take a look at my girl over here. I know she's on LinkedIn.
Instagram.
Where can they find?
Instagram,
Shout out
Twitter.
the clothing line.
Yeah.
All the
Shout out to
things.
other
The consulting
business.
business.
Yes.
Please be looking for that. Really, all things criminal justice reform. I really
Okay.
hope to lead this state and the
Okay.
nation. Work with other thought leaders like yourselves and people who really care. And there's not a point where people say, "Well, what can I do?" I really don't matter. Your voice and your influence and your platform and your perspective, it matters, and we have to come together to help think through what criminal justice reform looks like in the next 10 to 15 years. So with that being said, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Alisha SJ or Alisha S James. Or I mean, not to be funny, but you can Google me and
You
just
literally
Google
can
me.
Google her. You can.
And it'll pop up,
You
and,
can.
and you can follow me.
So are you going? Sorry, this is important.
Yeah.
Is it Alisha S James? Is it Alisha Schultz James? Like what we got going?
Alicia S James.
Okay, it's just
yeah,
S. Okay.
Alicia S James
Never
or
know.
Alicia
Keep up.
SJ1. Listen, just I don't.
And what's the name of your clothing?
So the clothing is Tim for Clothing,
Okay.
and the consulting is James Group Consulting,
Okay.
and the technology company is Quick Touch.
Look at you. That's amazing. So you be sure to follow my friend, okay? She's amazing. She is amazing. And as you follow her, be sure you're still following us. You can follow us on Instagram at what, Dr. Dangerfield? Instagram.
I am black. Look,
Look, y'all,
I always
changed our
always changing our name. I am Brown Girl Banter.
Yes, I'm following. You to follow.
Catch up. And you can follow me on Instagram at I am Dr. Patience, and you can follow Dr. Dangerfield at
I am Dr. Dangerfield, and on Facebook, as always, Professional Brown Girls.
Thank you, Mark
Okay.
Zuckerberg, for not letting us put I for Brown Girl Banter as our name. And they wouldn't let us do it. It's a whole thing.
Because
That's not that.
they say it wasn't a person.
Yeah, so that happens. And then be sure to follow us on YouTube, Brown Girl, one word banter. Subscribe, like, share, comment, all the things. We want you to do those things. And be sure to DM us your business so that we can pub you. We want to let other people know what you're out in the community doing. And you don't have to be here in Nashville.
No.
It does not matter. Wherever you are, send us that information. We'd love to shout you out on social media. Is that anything else? Did I cover everything?
You covered everything.
Usually, y'all know I don't usually do the ending, but I did it today. Boom, look at me.
I love this space. This is a safe space.
This is-
This is a great space. Yeah, that was great.
Well, we love y'all. We'll catch up with you all later. Be sure to keep bantering. Bye, Brown Girl Banter.
Bye.